Good afternoon, Ramjee. It's very nice to have you here at Heritage Baku and at the World Heritage Day. Today's April 18th. I couldn't think of a better person to have a quick chat with and kind of reaffirm my roots with Bangalore and the fact that so many wonderful things are happening. So many wonderful people are doing an incredible amount of work with their research, with their passion to kind of reach the history of Bangalore to more people. I know the history of Bangalore has been something that's been phenomenal, very well appreciated. I'm talking far too much. I mean, I probably don't have to introduce you, but I think everyone knows the multifaceted person that you are. Your roots in the publication world. I mean, I was a big fan. You were the only one. I think Explore City. I used to sort of Bangalore this fortnight. Oh my God, you have to be an old Bangalorean to know how much of a difference it made to our lives. You open it up and then you'd sort of say, okay, where do you go this weekend, or where's the new place? Amazing. And that's also part of the nuggets of Bangalore. And you have moved on to so many things. You're apart from being a musician and now an author. I can see your book is sort of winking at me at the background. Yeah, that's the new one. And you've had so many. I mean, your literary city, for example, has been an incredibly in-depth dive with some of the best voices in the world, and very, very matter of fact. So this is a space that you're brilliant at, Ramji, and your movement towards the history of Bangalore, apart from the literary spaces that you've explored, the creative spaces, the world of media, is too small to limit you. I want to talk to you about specifically this time on World Heritage Day, um, on some of the you know the efforts that have been made on the history of Bangalore in opening up our eyes to Bangalore in a very different way. And I think it's while I must admit we have been doing a little bit more of the Instagram uh, absorption. I would love to hear from you, Ramji. What made you start this incredible piece? Please fill us in on the journey and a little bit about the how and why.
So, first of all, thank you for having me up here. I think very highly of all the work that you're doing, Heritage Baku, and everything else that you're doing, Priya. So, I'm very happy to be here. So, happy World Heritage Day. Is there such a thing? Well, if there
There
is,
is. You just made it. Yeah.
all right, good.
Incidentally, this particular Heritage Day is about protecting heritage from destruction and whatever. So it's a bit negative this time, but it is what it is, and hopefully that doesn't happen, and we preserve and we conserve, etc. So yeah, back to you, Ramji.
So, you asked me how I stumbled into the history of Bangalore and so on. So, I've been chronicling Bangalore as a publisher of a city guide since you mentioned the name of it earlier, Bangalore This Fortnight, that was launched in 1989. And
Wow.
so it was a city guide. That's what became Explore City. As you do that, as I continue to do the guide part of that story itself, you come into contact with history, or at least what you think you know about it. But as it progressed, I suddenly found that a lot of stuff that I thought to be true about Bangalore was not true. And there's a lot of myths, starting with the name of the city, etc., that's still being perpetuated. I asked myself, if I don't know about it, then who knows about it? So I went around collecting every book that's been written about Bangalore, and I found that there was no history book of Bangalore at all the history is in the academy. There's the History Academy has they've done some fantastic work, continues to do fantastic work. Like for example, Uday Kumar's efforts with bringing technology to understanding inscriptions is one example. The Mythic Society under their umbrella, which is really fantastic. But most of the work, including the Mythic Society, including all the historians that did what they did about this history of this area, pretty much happened with Benjamin Lewis Rice towards the end of the 1800s. And I'll say that by 1920, 1925, they were all talked out. Most of it ended there. Most of the regular publishing of the history of Bangalore from primary sources, I find, ended over there. Then in 1974, very briefly, there was a little frothy, I don't use that word in a demeaning or derogatory way. I mean it with a great deal of respect. Fazlul Hassan's book, Bangalore Through the Centuries, came in. And he wrote that book. It was given away by his department as a gift to different people. And by default, that has become the book of history in Bangalore. Went out of print, couldn't find it anywhere until Naresh Narasimhan republished it, and
Yeah.
he republished that book. And it's nice, it's great. I think it's a wonderful effort, but it stops short of being a definitive book of history of Bangalore. So my thing was simple. I'm not going to sit and complain about it. If I'm going to complain about it, what am I doing about it after 30 years of writing about Bangalore? So I said, let me do what I do, write about Bangalore. So for the last year and more, I have been steeped every day, 10, 12 hours a day, in going back to these primary sources and researching the history of Bangalore from the start. And by history of Bangalore, it's not just what happened after Kempe Gowda built the Pete, but the centuries that led up to him building the Pete and the reason why he built it and built the fort. So there's a whole
Wow.
history to all of the surrounding areas, Begur, Hebbal, right up to Tumakuru, all the stuff that we consider to be Bangalore right now. Each one has a history going back to the time of the Kadambas and the Gangas and all the dynasties since then. So my season one of my podcast, 52 episodes, has tracked that history from the Kadambas and the Gangas in the 4th century right down to the start of the Vijayanagara kingdom. Season two, I start with the end of the Vijayanagara kingdom, Kempe Gowda, right up to the fall of Tipu. So that's going to happen this year. It's dropping on the 24th. It's 6 days from.
Wow.
So
No,
that's it.
that's something.
That's what motivates me. But now words like motivation and things are past because my life is wake up in the morning and start studying history until I sleep.
I cannot imagine that. For me, I'm just saying, I have another friend who's been, also doing her PhD. And I could tell you that when we were in college, if somebody used the word history, I mean, we would run in the opposite direction and say, oh my God, oh my God. It is so strange that it is the love of the city, or it's a love, it's not just the love of empty knowledge. I mean, there's never empty knowledge, but there's something that makes us want to go back and discover roots and discover connections. But what is it with you? You've answered that question, but I do want to understand with you, particularly, Ramji. You jump into this early in the morning. You do, from what I gathered, like 12 to 14 hours a day on primary research. I mean, this is awesome. This is so impressive. What made you do that? I still don't get that. What made you jump into this?
Principally because there was an absence of it.
Ah, okay.
So but I didn't see that as an opportunity. I didn't even realize that there was an absence of it. And I had no measure of how much. And this is what happens when you start looking at something that isn't there. So it's not that the information is not there. It's not that I'm the first person to do primary sources exist because somebody's already done them. Yeah,
Yeah.
going there, pursuing it, finding it, putting it in the right order, collecting it, etc., etc. See, the way I've explained it is that when you talk about history as such, it's history is not one thing; it's many disciplines that come together. So you have epigraphy, you have culture, you have language, you have architecture, art, politics of your, you have all of these things coming in, and where the Venn diagram of all these things overlaps that's where the history emerges and that's where the story emerges. So that can be told by anyone who is, you don't have to be it can be told by anybody who is an expert in any one of these disciplines, or a journalist, for example, who by training, what we have done by writing stories over the years is understand things conceptually by 4:30 p.m. and then write the story about it. So there are certain disciplines of journalism that can be easily brought forth to history. So it's just that we're a little more prepped. If you've written journalistic stories for decades, you're automatically predisposed towards doing this. So those are the benefits of doing it. But in the absence of news, for instance, or
Yeah.
the absence of history per se, rumor comes to take its place and grows like weeds all over. And then when you have that happening, it's very easy for all that to be hijacked for interests, whatever interests. Political interests are the easiest example, but there are other interests as well. So it's very easy to sit there and hijack all of these things and spin a narrative of your own making. It can go from rank politics, it can go from destruction of heritage, it can go from there, or it can just become somebody who just doesn't know how to place their pride. So they just invent stories and pick up whatever they can and spin a narrative in their heads and say, this is who I am and this is where I came from. I know this to be true because I'm saying this after 1 year of doing what I've done, and after my Instagram promotional page for the podcast hit 50,000 followers very quickly, and I tell you, speaking of history, one of the most gratifying things people are saying is, "I wish you taught me history when I was in school." So, but here's very nice to hear that, but
Ramji,
I want
what would your
people to know that I'm not a history professor. I'm a poorly educated individual. I will never be a history professor. There are people way more qualified than I to do that. So,
not true, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
so that's what it is. But as I said, right now, I've done season one of my podcast. Now I've been signed up by Penguin to write the history book, History of Bangalore. I've already started doing this. And to do this, I go even further back. I've been studying geology, so I'm going back to the geology of the area and how that geology had a direct relevance and affected history in terms of politics, in terms of commerce, in terms of everything else. And the lives that we live every day in this region over here has a direct bearing on the type of rocks and lie of the land that exists. It still affects us today. And it's very interesting. So when it comes out, buy the book.
I'm very excited. Tell us how this. I want to say one more thing, which is, what would your history professor in college or your history teacher in school say if you knew you were doing this? Do you remember any of them? Can you remember how they looked at you?
Uh, I don't know. By the time until I got to high school, I was a dud. When I got to high school, I was a genius. And I think all my education pretty much stopped over there. I went to college reasonably well. It's okay. But, I never pursued academics as I should have. But I didn't. So what do they think
Look
of
at it
me?
now.
I don't
I'm
even know. I don't even know if they'll remember me. So I'm not sure. You know how
Yeah, but
history in Indian schools was total rubbish. I mean, the sense that you just mug up dates and you mug up events and you spit them out, you take
yes.
the exam, and you're done with it. That's one. Here's another part of it. The history of the South has been completely ignored all these years. Very little
Mhm.
of it has been taught in school. And the
Yeah.
only place where I found, and I've done some digging into this, the only place that I find that there's actual Karnataka history, leave alone Bengaluru history, not much of Bengaluru history that's been done, but even Karnataka history, I've only found it in the local SSLC school books, 8th, ninth standard school books. I found some reasonable mention of things. Even in some other places in local education, it's sad that the only dynasty they talk about is Vijayanagara, and that's it, and nobody
Mhm.
else. So it's been dealt an a completely horrible a place in history, the telling of history. South, everyone knows this. The South has been completely ignored. Right now, there are people who are coming into it, telling the stories, claiming parts of history for themselves. There are some wonderful authors who have done some pretty great books. So now you're hearing lots more about the Deccan kings, about the Choras, about the Kerala kings over there, and there are individuals who are they're doing great stuff. They have my respect, and they're all doing wonderful stuff. And what is heartening is that we're just at the beginning of it.
That's so true. I mean, to look forward and say that there's going to be a lot more that's done, primarily because of greater interest, more people who are willing to invest in that space, like yourself, for example. Uh, it excites me to know that possibility exists, because to know more, to be able to see it in its context, is something essentially, I think truly nurture, fulfilling. Cliche though it sounds. Tell us about the book, Ramji. I mean, it seems to be an obvious thing, with the kind of scholarship and research that's gone in. And I was absolutely astounded when you mentioned casually to me about the kind of time and work that you've put in. And I do know that the level of primary research in this space, and particularly for Bangalore, is hard to find. It's difficult to source. There are also issues around language, because you have to go back into more ancient scripts. You have to be willing to, to constantly connect. So tell us about that bit as well, Ramji.
Well, I'm very, very happy and grateful for the emergence of AI-based scholarship tools that happen, like Google Scholar and so on. And they're a great help that wasn't there even when I started this project. The amount of work that I had to do offline was considerable more than I have to do now. And there's a lot of that available. So more information is available from more easily and much quicker. So that's one thing I must put down out there. As far as the reason, you said something a little earlier in this conversation about heritage per se. We want to know about our heritage. That is the driving reason why we want to know about our history. People are more interested to know about history because they need to relate it to themselves. So even if you look at my Instagram page, if you look at how well each of these reels do, the core history reels are doing fine. They're doing okay. We get, anywhere from 8,000 to 30,000, 40,000 views on a page. Every Sunday, I do something on Bangalore, which is relatable to things that you see for yourselves. They do vastly more. I did something on Frasertown that's almost at 1 million views. And a few days ago, I did something on why there's afternoon rains in Bangalore. And that's like crossed 500,000 views yesterday, etc. That what it tells me is that people are very interested to have any information that helps them connect with what they can hear and see around them. And
Absolutely.
that's the reason why heritage is important. So when you talk about heritage, you talked about buildings and so on. So sometimes we think about heritage, and a lot of people, I'm sure you face this. A lot of people might think of what you do as just saving a building from construction, destruction,
Yeah.
so on. But it goes much deeper, doesn't it? Like, for example, if you take a look
Yes.
at one of the questions I asked myself when I started doing this project is, why did Bangalore exist? Why does it exist? We are 3,000 feet above sea level. We're a city, big metropolis, world-known metropolis. We're not near a source of natural water, as every other metropolis is. So how did we get to be a metropolis without water? We didn't always pump water up from the Kaveri. With what would you have pumped water? There's no electricity.
Yeah.
And rainwater
Yeah.
harvesting goes back to the Gangas. And there are inscriptions that commemorate somebody for having built this tank and then 3 tanks and then connected them up by canals to take care of overflow. And these tanks hold the rainwater because that's where they collect it. And every one of these people invested in that infrastructure. I'm talking about the kings, right from the eighth century onwards. At least the work that I have done, I go back to finding evidence of rainwater harvesting projects starting from the 8th century, where they made sure that there's adequate water everywhere. Even today, go to Bangalore, take a look at Google Maps, zoom out a little bit, and take a look. You'll find a lot of blue patches all over Bangalore, right? These are all tanks, man-made, built tanks and natural depressions, like every resort, hillside resort where you go boating on the lake. It's basically dammed water that is collected at a low place, rainwater. They harvested this rainwater, they used it for irrigation, and that's how this area survived. That's how we got water. Until one day somebody decided, why, we don't need to do all this, let's just pump it from the Kaveri, and then things took a turn. So that's heritage. Now, to my mind, I'm extraordinarily happy that people are looking to reclaim lakes, etc. There doesn't have to be a reason to do it. It's just
Yeah.
sensible to do it. Lakes, you have water, you can harvest water, rainwater. There's individual rainwater harvesting that's mandated now at the apartment levels. And I think that if people like you just foster this and push it a little forward, it's there will be an abundance of resources. We're not running out of anything per se.
Some of it is just small, small movements. Like you're taking it from the history and you're talking about the lakes. And now when you start talking about what we can do currently, I mean, I'm looking at, say, Cubbon Park or even the
Oh,
Indira
that,
Gandhi Fountain. There, they've put in almost 25 rain harvesting pits, which has been done. And it's many people may not know that Cubbon Park still buys water from outside. I mean, it's been that's a shame. So with this, maybe in a few years' time, they will get water positive. So at the end of it, what you talk about the past and some of the destruction and the prevention of future destruction becomes a space that you and I can make a difference in the now. And that's the beauty of history, of not repeating mistakes, of being able to do the good things that have been done in the past sometimes. And I look at, I remember, Ramjee, I was, when I was a child, I was 4 years old and eating mud on the road, according to my father. But I was living next to what is now Mahavir Jain Hospital. It was Miller Tank Band, not Miller Tank Band Road, but Miller Tank Band. And I have been there when it was. So there will be a time when there will be nobody who probably will tell us about the time where the Majestic was a lake, or when Kantirva Stadium was a lake. But I hope there will be enough people to tell the stories, because the stories are not just about a lake. It's story about survival and collaboration and human and ecology sort of surviving together, and about the history of people that had their occupation and their lives around these kind of spaces. And those stories also need to be told. Many people absolutely loved the Palakkad story because the previous day, it magnificently and gently rained in Bangalore. And all of us, we have that collective Bangalore sigh, right? Because we know what that cool breeze feels like. We know, and it's just like a complete validation. And they came your podcast with this, or I saw the Instagram version, with this, and immediately a couple of people from the Heritage Bakery group, and there was Raghu, who's such an informed guy, and he's from Palakkad himself. He went into the whole geology part of it, which I'm sure you all, I mean, of course, you already know. But the conversation just turned, and everybody was fascinated. Brings back to your point, which says when it comes closer to who you are and what you see, you have a greater interest in wanting to invest in the information, and thereby hopefully wanting to protect it and maybe do
Closer,
something.
and it's actually closer than we think it is. You, for example, your work with Cubbon Park is very visible, is very necessary, and I congratulate you for it. You're doing a lot with that group, and it's a very active group. But when you talk about when I talk about it being closer, what I mean is this: in 1996, I launched this magazine called the Bangalore Monthly,
Yeah.
and one day I got a call from
Yes.
Justice Michael Saldana saying, "You come over here." So my first reaction was, "Good grief! I didn't do anything. What did I do?" So it's the sitting High Court judge calling me to see him. But as it turns out, he was calling to talk to me about what he saw as the destruction of Cubbon Park. So even then, I went into it. And here's a very frothy idea of all the stuff that you have mentioned about heritage and so on. And we talked about rainwater harvest. Let me tell you how this part worked. The design, Richard Sankey's design of using that to build Cubbon Park, started with rainwater falling on the hill, which has now the cricket stadium on it, Chinnaswamy Stadium. And
Ah,
then water flows downhill, which is Cubbon Park. Four ponds were created in Cubbon Park to hold the rainwater,
yeah.
to feed the trees. And the spill, the overflow from these particular ponds, if you like, would then
Yeah.
go and fall into Sampangi Lake, which is now Kantirava Stadium.
So
This
like
was
that.
yeah, so this was the design per se as it stands. They found that there was a lot of silting of those ponds, and the water in the ponds
Uh-huh.
were becoming rancid, and they were not, I don't know if rancid is the right word to use, but they were stagnant and breeding mosquitoes, and I'm going to say rancid. The water was not reaching. So when they dredged it, I think at the order of Michael Saldana, they found all kinds of construction debris inside those ponds. So the big question, they found things like sanitary shit pots. They found things like that inside all of these ponds.
Yeah. Yeah.
To try to find out where did this come from? How come this debris over here?
Yeah.
Strangely, where did it come from? It came from the High Court because they were building an extension. So the big question is, why does the High Court extension, this is all irony heaped on irony over here, why does the High Court extension debris have to go into those ponds? And then the reason for that came about. So the contractor at that point in time had a contract of 18 lakhs, which is a lot of money in 1996 or earlier, to cart this material to the outskirts of the city in the dump, all the debris. But he found a cheaper way of doing it. Go by night, take the trucks inside Cubbon Park, dump into the ponds, no one's the wiser. And the trees can die. Riding on the back of this, I know that there was, I can't mention any names, and I'm not going to offer any proof, but I know that there was some interest by some peripheral players, not the main developers, and I can tell you that for a fact, but some peripheral players who were interested in developing a part of Cubbon Park for low cost housing. And Justice Saldana pretty much put a stop to it. Anyway, I published an article about this called The Conspiracy to Kill Cubbon Park. And
I
that was one of the many initiatives that helped towards saving the park and bringing up awareness and saying, enough is enough, and helping Justice Saldana pass a suo moto order to protect parts of the park. And once that happens, it's very difficult to go sly on all of those things. So the ponds are back. It's been dredged, all that crap has been taken out. So things are back over there. Protecting heritage, there's a great example. The stuff that you're doing out there is great. Can't you do something about limiting the traffic though?
Don't get me started, Ramji. I want to go back first to your point of the amazing story about the ponds. But it's still called the lotus pond and the dry pond. And the dry pond, unfortunately, is still a little dry. We've got to work on that. But we're working on the hydrology table. We need to get the mechanics of it set so that we don't have the problems recurring because there's a structural problem. So I mean, it's absolutely fantastic what you're saying. And Bimal, all those people who just went there and stood strong at a time when there was nothing, nothing. I've mentioned this in a recent interview that if people like them had not been around, we would have been looking at maybe two malls and maybe a couple of housing structures right there. We've seen enough erosion, and I won't get started on that because we all start frothing at the mouth when we think of already
You think
the
of urban heights?
Carbon Heights. I will at some point, if you have a look at Nalaponapa's cartoon, which I loved, he made it for us, which is a picture of Carbon Park 1947 and a picture of Carbon Park 2047. 2047 had one tree, five buildings, and one statue of a poor Sir Mark Cubbon standing alone with concrete and one tree. It was a very powerful image, but I'm saying it's a possibility, and it is still a possibility. Coming to your question about your point on traffic free, on Carbon Park, Heritage Beko has, I'm diverging into some things that they really mean, they really sort of bring me down on my knees and to tears. Is COVID gave us an example of what could be done. Give us they say, taste it and see if you like it, then you can buy it. COVID had many things going wrong, but it brought the park to such utter beauty. Mushrooms, new forms of, new species of ants. The birds came back. I mean, the ponds were glowing. It was amazing to see what happened to Carbon Park because it was left alone, no traffic, no pollution. And then we started our very well-known campaign called Traffic Free Carbon Park. And Ramji, that is the only campaign Heritage Beko has lost.
Mm.
But we came up to the last stage, and one day I will do a series only on that to see what people could have done up to the last stage, to the extent the minister, the judiciary, everybody said, yeah, we agree with it, let's do it. It was one person, Joint Commissioner of Traffic, and somehow you can be the nicest person in the world, but the moment you enter the seat or you sit on this, on the chair of Commissioner of Traffic, something happens. Cubbon Park becomes a thoroughfare. So I don't want to dwell too much on that because even despite the fact a 6-month-old child put a PIL saying, I need my Cubbon Park. If today Cubbon Park had won that, we would have had a beautiful space like Lal Bagh, completely self-contained, completely beautiful, and completely a commons open to its people. So it still breaks my heart, but it is what it is. And as the future is bright, things can happen. We've at least managed to save it from many, many, we've had Saturdays, Sundays again taken back. We fought recently and, had that done. But it does feel, Ramji, I mean, you've started the fight many years ago, as you said, it was 97. Is that when it happened?
96, but let me say very, very clearly, I wasn't like Bimal and the others. They were the real activists. I was just a journalist. I just wrote the story. That's all. So
Ramji, that's not true because what happened is they had no partnership at all. The media that supported them was initially and always will be you. That cover story is something we use a lot. It has got Amu on the cover. I've seen that, and the kind of
I'm
detail.
talking about the one that had Bimal on the cover.
Yeah.
And Bimal Desai, he was my best cover girl yet.
It was an amazing story. So I don't know how Bimal will be. He was the man, he was the Onida ad, right, for a while, and such a great theater person too. But
Oh,
the fact,
he did wonderful work. So to acknowledge it, we put him on the cover of the magazine because that was the right thing to do.
yes, yes. Those were times when you were, the word activist was very different and you were alone, you were a lone ranger. But I know what he did. I know what a lot of people came together to do. But the beauty is at that point, you needed facts. There had to be a bad guy. There had to be a story that engaged people enough to say, no, they can't do it to us. They can't. No, how can you? Because it's Cubbon Park. And Cubbon Park will always be a rallying point, so that is something that is there. Sorry, I've got the traffic free covered park is something that always gets me into a bit of a loop because I still think of the power of the possible. I still think of what can be done.
I've heard both sides of the argument, but I'm with you. I think that it's not a bad idea if we cut out traffic. Also, because we're not exactly a very disciplined traffic nation. I know that
Yeah,
this line would have inspired some laughs already, but I've seen people over there, especially when it's empty over there, just gun it, and it's not a happy thing.
that is not.
Us and traffic and discipline and park and these things are all best each one left to its own devices. And I think the
Okay.
government should be
But did you know that Lal Bagh had traffic till mid 70s?
sort of. I did know that because I was frequent in my childhood. That's where we went all the time. We went to Lal Bagh all the time. So I remember I have memories of it from my childhood very easily, and I remember all of those things as well. There was
There's
traffic.
a picture of a bullock cart and ambassador, or that kind of, which is there. So some kind soul stopped it. So I'm saying the
There
good
wasn't
thing,
much traffic. And
not
for
much time.
example, if you take the levels of traffic back in the 60s, when it wasn't very much, I mean, I'm talking about right up to the 80s, 70s, 80s, you could drive anywhere you wanted in Bangalore and park. So we're talking about two very, very different things over here. So if there was traffic, my parents, when I was a kid, they had a scooter. So I remember the scooter used to go into Lal Bagh. They used to park near where we sat down and so on. Maybe there were two others, vehicles in all. That's all I can remember. So it was back then. Maybe it wasn't a big problem back then. Today it's very different. We have
It is very good.
more
I mean,
vehicles in the country, and
no, we live with destruction. I mean, at the end of it, it's very difficult, to sort of say that, are you going to be the flagellating chest beater who says, "Oh my God, it must be exactly the same way it is," but some of it for the future has to be protected. So, I'm very conscious. I think all of us are very, very keen to work with government, to be middle of the road, to constantly understand both sides of the argument, work with people for solutions while protecting what is heritage. I think those things are what we need going forward. But to engage people, and I'm getting back to what History of Bangalore is doing, um, that is engaging people in a way which is a bit of a buffet. And I sort of congratulate you for that, because you have the little teasers, which are the quizzes. You have the Instagram posts, which give you enough information, which is a bit of a nugget for the Instagram generation. Says, okay, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I can figure this one out. But this is wonderful. And that really, the quiz segues into the posts or the reels, and the reels segue into the real stuff, which is your podcasts. So I use the Instagram and podcasts interchangeably, which is my bad. But what really is happening,
everything is good with
yeah,
whatever you have time for.
what we have, yeah, that's very generous of you. And that's the podcast is where the real effort, the research, the kind of academics, and in a good way, it sounds very distant when really sort of comes out. And I would love to know. I mean, I thank you for that, because that kind of buffet gives a lot of scope to people who have different levels of time, interest, or engagement to love their city a little bit more. To like, I'm going to say this again, and everybody in Heritage Beko has heard me saying this a million times, but this is our core. At Heritage Beko, we only say this, that we've got a million irons in the fire. We've got things going on, whether it's an effort on heritage dates, it's Cubbon Park, or it's initiative to save the Shishadripuram police station. We are really sort of working on multiple guns. But for us, as either old or new citizens of Bangalore, visitors to Bangalore, anything, that phrase, or that statement apparently by Jacques Cousteau, which resonated so much, is what you're doing, which is, you can't love what you don't know, and you cannot save what you don't love. So the journey of Heritage Beko has always been from the knowing, which is so much of what you're doing, the loving, which you're trying to build up, and fingers crossed, eventually for that, the saving. I'm not saying that every piece of work, or something that you put out there, has to have an end goal, which is saying, okay, I will send you information about this, and I will share this with all my research and all my heart, and now go and do something about it. I don't think it's as pedestrian as that. But I'm coming back to Your thoughts. This is a book that's in the making, but where where will it go? Where will all this go? Where do you see it going?
I I think it's not a bad idea for different people to pick their lane and stick to it.
Very
And
well
as you
said.
said just a little earlier, I think that I do it so that I can write a book that is comprehensive, and I want it to be the most comprehensive book of history of Bangalore. That's what I'm shooting for. Whether I'll get there or not is another matter. The people will feel about it, but that's my effort nonetheless. That's what I'm trying to do in a very honest to purpose kind of manner. So that's what I'm working on right now. As far as work is concerned, with Heritage Beku, all that amazing thing that you're doing with those the dog groups, the squads that you've set up all over the city, that that needs to be mentioned, and you need to be recognized for it, Priya. And, it's all connected. Into my mind, there is no difference between those dog squads and Heritage Beku and so on. The reason is this: the animals on our street, they're a part of our heritage, and the animals are a living, breathing part of everything that we do on a regular basis. You don't suddenly claim a street and say, get rid of all the animals from here, any more than animals can come to a street and say, let me eat all the human beings over here. And it doesn't really work in that particular way. And it's a great example of how we should do the best we can, having created this urban concrete mess. And how do we now take care of all the people that have to exist with it? And those people include, say, dogs, for instance, right? The only way that I believe, I'll actually repeat something that I said during the book launch of the book on Cubbon Park, when written by Rupa Pai. She wrote that book, and she'd invited me to speak at her book launch. And
I was there, yeah.
yeah, and the thing that I mentioned was something that I have seen about Bangalore from a very long time, is that different cities have a buy-in to something that they are proud of. In a sketchy way, you take Bombay, for instance, they are very proud of their traffic discipline. And if you were to do something over there, you will get some, hostile stares from people if you start to break the law. I'm not sure how it is today, but from some years ago, I remember very clearly they were every single taxi driver was very, very happy about staying disciplined about traffic on the streets and so on. It simply means that they recognized that they had to coexist with other drivers, and they were proud of it. That's what it was. In Bangalore, the buy-in is to greenery.
Yeah.
Over here, the example I used was this: you can drive your car or your two-wheeler up the wrong way up a one-way street, and people might just be mildly irritated by it. But try cutting a branch of a tree. People will stop and they'll want to know why the hell you're doing that. And the reason for that is because there's a general buy-in to the business of greenery. So that's something that we Bangaloreans have learned to adopt, and then we innately feel that we have to protect it, and we feel that it's a part of our heritage. In the same manner, the reason why I think that I should point out what you've done with the dog squads is because you have created a buy-in. This is not being done in some hierarchical kind of fashion where there's an organization and there's a diktat going down and each one has a role and people have to live up to it. That's not what happened. The only organization that I've seen you do is a WhatsApp group. People buy into WhatsApp and then they get together, and it's of their own volition that they come together in these dog squads. I've seen it happen in my neighborhood with undying admiration for what I've seen going on in this place, where there's an active buy into it. People just rush to the help when things are needed. And it's motivated me hugely. I'm not a member of that squad. My partner is, but I help where I can. Very, very importantly, all that happened because of one person, and that's you. It's your initiative, and I think that people should recognize that it wouldn't have been simple for you to create a city-wide buy-in to the business of the canine squads. So, for you.
Thank you, Ramji. Thank you so much. You can't see my toes, but right now my toes are doing this. But yeah, you know that Radha's been such an incredible voice of the Fraser Canyon Squad, for example, and you yourself need to realize the different connecting points that kind of make a difference and sometimes create what we call the loving
No,
stories in heritage.
nowhere near what Radha and the others, what seen them do with going out and rescuing dogs and so on. I'm a talking voice. I'm a talking head. That's
There's a picture that nobody has forgotten of a man sitting in a raincoat trying to protect a little dog in the park in the rain. And that picture has gone pretty much viral. And I think I
she's
know the
probably
person.
life of a queen and Bodhi Nayakanur, by the way, ruling the roost. She's the queen of Bodhi Nayakanur right now.
And so we've imported her all the way to Tamil Nadu, and she's having a free time. But that little dog owes her life and her future and her current, present, and her future to you because of that one thing that you did. And I'm very proud because we have something called HEAL. Of course, it's a play on the word heal, as in heal to a dog, but it stands for HEAL, Happily Ever After Legends. And
Oh,
that's one thing I'm grateful for. The heal that we have sort of enabled have been because of multiple people. And it has been. So, it's a strange thing because many of these worlds have come together in Cubbon Park, particularly because of the dog park. And people have kind of worked on this, very, very collaboratively. But Ramji, thank you so much for that. And while it's a bit of a departure, I'm grateful for the words and the thoughts on that. The point that you made about greenery is is so true. I never thought about uh, our trigger point in Bangalore, and that is green. You're absolutely spot on. When I think the worst sound that Bangalore can hear today is the buzzsaw
oh yeah,
when a tree goes
I
down.
agree.
Yeah. So
A few
it's
sounds
you put it
inspired
on
something
anywhere in
like
my
that.
neighborhood, and people step up and they fight. So we've had a couple of failures, but at the end of it, it's not just saying, something's happened, Priya. Can you please fix it? This is what is, I mean, what am I going to do in Baswangudi or something? People are now organizing themselves saying, I know what to do. I know how to
What I
work.
mean. This is what I mean. There's a, people talk about grassroots, they don't understand what grassroots means. To my mind, it just means that people are buying into the agenda, they're buying into it, they understand it, and that's permeating all over Bangalore. It's permeating. I can see the improvement in the way people are looking at. The police commissioner, for example, had a reel the other day where he talked about some 6 or 7 ways in which I take my hat off. I mean, he's the one wearing a hat, but I take my metaphorical hat off because of
Yeah.
what he chose to do in his reel, which was recognize that we have animals and we should take care of them. He went to the extent of saying, if it's inclement weather, then give them a space in your parking lot and make that happen. And
Yeah.
this goes to not being selfish about the whole thing. And I applaud him for that. And I think we should recognize it too.
Absolutely. And this is when it comes from authorities. Even in COVID time, Bhaskar Rao said,
Yeah.
you can't go out of your house, but if you want to take a dog for a walk, you can. So there was a lot of sensitivity, which is absolutely phenomenal. And even if you look at, we're talking about the greenery, one of the things we've put forward from Heritage Beku has been trying to replicate an idea of a green ambulance, a tree ambulance. Very basic stuff of just having, and it costs nothing. It's so little. A company will sponsor it. So the deputy, conservator forest is still looking into it, but we've given them a model. Delhi has done something similar, so we've taken inputs from there. All we need is, either for trimming or for re replenishing a tree. Sometimes you just need the beeswax and orange to help the tree grow again. Those are things that will make a difference to a city. And can you imagine, Ramji, the sense of connect and confidence when we feel we don't see a van with a bus saw, but we see a tree ambulance. I think it's a branding thing, it's a mental thing. So I hope and pray these are some of the small things that we keep hoping will make that connect, will make things happen.
See, I'll tell
Um,
you, there's another interesting, you mentioned this, I'll explain. There's something else that's exactly smack dab in the middle of your story. And I was in an Uber and we pulled up at the traffic lights, where Cubbon Road meets Dickinson Road at the junction where the Manipal Center is. It's that area. And right there, there was the whole kerfuffle going on over there. People are all agitated. I couldn't see from where I was sitting. And my driver was getting most agitated by this entire thing. He was leaning out, shouting at the people on the street. I said, "What's going on?" He's saying, "Well, there's a kite stuck on the tree. And look at these people. They don't know anything about what to do about it. They're just going to kill the damn thing." So he jumped out and he opened up his phone and gave them the number of ARCC.
RRC, ARRC, the amazing guys, yeah.
ARCC.
ARRC, Aerial
ARRC,
Reptile
ARRC.
and Respiratory.
I've called them twice because once, twice I've had to, my birds have been in my garden. I've called them and they're fantastic people. and all they wanted was old newspapers for their troubles. So anyway, so he jumped out, and I was very surprised because he jumped out. He went and so I paid a little more attention to say that, wait a minute, this is good. I mean, here's this is another example of all what I call grassroots, right? At the same time, four others had the same idea. Four other people jumped out. Everybody was calling what we see on American TV shows as 911. We're all calling our equivalent of Bird 911 is it ARRC, and everyone is shouting at them saying, "What kind of people are you? Don't even know ARRC? Here's the number." So there's a crowd of people, and these were all every last one of them was a driver of one of the cabs of the cars that came out of their cell phones and did it. And I don't think you can get more grassroots than that or more buy-in from that. And I think that it's what's really motivating and inspiring is not complaints as much as success stories. And I think that's what gives people the hope that did it work? That lake actually gets saved? Oh, then maybe this lake can be saved, rather than just kvetch about all the lakes going down.
Very true. You need to know, I think success is a critical element in embodying. You have to be the first person who steps up to either step up for a tree or save a dog. 5 people will join you. You just need to be the first person who can do it.
I agree.
I take a little bit up from even what you said about the kite. I mean, we are also trying to work with the RRC on the heritage of birds for Bangalore, and that's a discussion we hope to have. We have some experts on birds for Common Park particularly who are going to be doing a session with us, and also seeing how they can revive and enable more, a better bird population in these locations. We're focusing on Common Park. But we ran a campaign, and this is from the other trust that I run called CJ Memorial Trust. We ran a campaign called Stranglehold, which was supposed to help ban manja from kite flying, which is a thing that we all enjoy, and it's a pongal and all that. But there are thousands of kites and birds which are stuck on trees and in the most gruesome conditions. So ARRC is in Common Park, like 4 times a week, trying to, with ladders to try and bring them down. So we worked on a campaign, and this is, I think, what we're good at, where we worked with police, pollution board, BBMP, and a lot of great things happened. And it has been banned. It is already banned, but now you're liable for punishment.
Good.
So I can send you the link of that. And that petition was, almost about like 20, 30,000 signatures. But we got everybody together to be able to say, help you understand you can use alternatives. And we found people who were making polyester jackets. That was the ruse, that they were making polyester jackets. Actually, they were making the plastic filament for those killer manja threads. So the name was coined at that time. Stranglehold was coined by me and with Jayanti. And of course, we had PFA, we had CUPA, everybody join in. These are again examples of where people come in to do great work. We ran a campaign called Kill Bill, Ramjee, which was around this, which is when they wanted to bring an amendment to add additional 10 species of trees which you could cut without permission by the parastatals. So BBMP, BWSSB could cut it, and you don't necessarily have to ask. We didn't know about it. It was just pushed over some little gazette notification. We didn't realize until Harni Nagendran told me, said, that really covers about 85% or 90% of all trees in Bangalore. So technically, all these trees can be cut without permission and without what they call a public consultation if there are more than 50 trees. We ran this campaign, and again, I think that's a separate discussion, because that was an intense campaign which went on 5 or 6 different engines. And finally, it succeeded because we did something called Storm the Sauda, where 5 or 6 people wearing green clothes would go and sit in Vidhan Sauda to make sure that those darn legislators didn't quietly pass the rule when nobody was looking, because that's how steel flyover happened. There was
Yeah,
an
yeah.
obituary. And then, so sometimes you just have to be silly and watchful like this.
No, I
Now,
think it's fabulous. I think that those are the people that are. But I just want to tell you about that story that I told you about the traffic incident where people jumped out and gave AR. See, here's the telling thing about the whole thing. I had their number, and to be frank, I didn't step out and give the number to them. All right, I didn't even think that it was in my place to go and tell them about it. And truthfully, I didn't know that there was a kite on a tree, and by the time I discovered it, and they're all gone. But that is not the point. I was not. It didn't strike me to jump out of the car and go and give them that number, but it did with all of these other guys, and so a dollop of humility over there as well. So
no, I mean, what could you do? You're sitting in a car. You didn't notice something that they did. The fact is, somebody did. ARRC has got, in fact, the Community Guardian Award of the Year for last year. So Jayanti Kalam is the person because her extraordinary ability to run an organization,
Amazing.
completely response time is maximum half an hour.
It's
You know,
amazing. It's
and
amazing.
it's
I've had two occasions to experience what they did, and again, I have nothing but respect. It's fantastic.
100% trust. And again, we are as a let's hope that we can do something. Maybe one of your podcasts will be on birds because there is a lot. We saw two peacocks in Common Park. I could not, I mean, of course, now we see egrets and kingfisher, but I mean, it was amazing that we saw peacocks in times of COVID, walking around very casually, like, oh, okay, whatever. You know, you talked a little bit about the research. We loved the story of Kali, and all of us shared it across multiple places of a king with who wanted his warrior's dog and what he did with it and what the dog did for him. But these are stories that will always catch your heart. Your Palakkad story was something, and the Bangalore, the first Bangalore podcast was again something I think that we just makes us feel warm and fuzzy, and that's also a good thing. But what is what has been the research that has led you to find something which has been your inspiration or your favorite stories in all this? There's a lot of hard stuff you're doing. The research on the Cholas or the Gangas going back, I mean, you're talking about 350 AD and and you're talking even about geological history and stuff that is wildly interesting. And but also hard. I mean, this is not like, okay, so let's read a magazine on, this is fun to read. It's not a flippant stuff that you can. What is it that inspires you? Which are the ones that particularly are your favorites?
I can't really isolate any one aspect of it, but it's having started this research over here and trying to find out about everybody and start to read about the kings and what they did and what they didn't do and so on. It's remarkably different from everything that we have read and understood to be history when you start looking at the, say, for instance, the literary skills of a Ganga king like Durvinita, for instance. Now, the history scholarship gets his date of ascendancy to the throne wrong by a margin of error that's 150 years. Now, in what history is this acceptable? But scholars have differed this widely at the turn of the century. So that's on the one part. But here's the one thing that they have found is that big, well-known poets of the day like Dandin and the others have recognized Durvinita as being a great scholar and a great writer and so on. So the multifaceted nature of all of these kings, it fascinates me to a great deal. That's one. The second thing, that is the education that these princes of the court were put through because they knew that one of these kids is eventually going to become king. So they had better be qualified to be able to rule us. So the inscriptions, all the stuff that I've read has revealed what their education was, their training, not just in fighting and weaponry, but in science and math and in management. They gave them lessons in management. How are you going to manage your people? Then instilled in them all kinds of virtues as to what is a virtuous king and there's a dharma and the sense of all of those things. All of those things were tried to be instilled. And it's very clear that the kind of education that royalty received, men principally, I don't know how much such education the women received. I know it's not zero, but there's no evidence as to how much they did or did not receive. But nonetheless, society at that point in time fascinates me because in many ways it was much more robust than it is today. And that's I find as the most fascinating part of it. So it's not just a parade of bloodthirsty fellows who are just running around killing each other. There was an undercurrent of society on the one part. The other thing that fascinated me is that right through the entire bloody history of the Deccan, and the history of the Deccan has been nothing but a parade of wars, almost endless number of wars between the four kingdoms that existed. In the middle of all this, all of them got together and left one thing untouched, and that's trade. Trade went on because there was trade from pre AD times and BC times. There was trade from the Greeks and the Romans on the one hand, and from towards the east on the other side, on the other coast. And Bangalore was smack dab in the middle of the trade routes that went back and forth, carting goods from here to there. So, in the middle of wars, there's a war taking place, but these trade caravans had to pass through the warring kingdoms completely untouched. So, I have unearthed,
An achievement.
sorry?
I mean, that's quite an achievement
They,
to,
they just knew what was good for them, so that's all there was to it.
yeah,
Like for
yeah.
instance, I've done some reels about this group called the Ayavole 500. Ayavole is the old name for Aihole, and there are
Mhm.
500 merchants over there. The class of merchants that pretty much ruled everything. Their importance in being able to actually influence and install kings has not been adequately researched. I know that
Wow.
Anirudh Kanisetti did a little bit in his book, and he had brought out the importance of those guys in providing all the maritime logistics to the Choras, for example, in the Eastern campaigns. And he has brought that out in his latest book. And it's fascinating that there's so much more that needs to be unearthed. So when you talk about history, we talk about heritage, all that is a part of who we are today in Bangalore, and we don't quite understand it. So what part of it fascinates me? I can't take it apart. The whole thing fascinates me.
Yeah. No, I can understand that if it's there's so much of interconnectedness, and you know, it's like you go there, but then that goes here, then you say, oh my God, that happened. So and you mentioned an interesting sort of a analogy or a vision of, how what history is, and you talked about it being like a bit of a Venn diagram where heritage sort of comes in the middle. So just walk me through those different elements that kind of make our history our heritage, and the kind of, because that's the kind of research you've had to do. It's not about a building, it's about a culture, it's about a history, it's about education, so many different things. So just walk me through that. I thought that was a very interesting perspective.
Yeah, it just defines how you come to know about what happened in the past.
Mm.
So one of the things that you can look at is the starting point has to be something, and the starting point for our history in the Deccan, for instance, has been on inscriptions, and that's pretty much everywhere. But here, you start with the inscriptions. For instance, you read an inscription, and it talks to you that such and such a thing happened. It could be a prashasti extolling the line of kings of a particular dynasty, or that this particular king was second only to God and rivaled Arjuna
Mm.
in archery and so on. So all of those things apart, you take it apart and you start to get to the heart of what happens. At the same time, you read another stone that says, this king said good work to someone who set up 3 tanks, water tanks near Begur. And you realize, okay, where are those tanks? And you start to look at those tanks, and you suddenly find out that this particular tank that they're talking about is Belandur tank, right? So you realize that it's right there. And if you read the descriptions, it's exactly Belandur tank. You can see it. You go to Google Map, you look at it, you see the little body of water near the larger body of water. All these things were recorded. And then you take a look at who was the king at that point in time. So you suddenly realize that this was done so far back. They're talking about the 9th century that these tanks were constructed. And why were they
Right.
constructed? What do they do with all of these things? So you take it from there, you start to look at inscriptions. There are people, each one is an expert in itself. If you come down to Vijayanagara, most of the great scholarly work has focused on the architecture of Vijayanagara more than the history itself. Historians, if you read the books of historians like Robert Sewell and Bertenstein and the others, they have nothing but complaints about the lack of history in Vijayanagara. They complain that there's no history left to talk about. It's just terrible that there's absence of information. But then if you start reading the inscriptions and piece it together, look at the art, look at the architecture, look at the history, the legends, then from legends, oral histories that have been written somewhere, you pick up nuggets from there, then you piece them all together. And what I meant was if each is a circle, the point at which the circles overlap,
It,
the Venn diagram, in the middle of all that is the history of that particular place. And that's where you can get the history from. So it's available. All the pieces are there. If you decide to piece them together, you can solve the jigsaw puzzle.
it is that, right? A jigsaw puzzle, which is exciting and interesting. Ah,
But let me say that telling the story it was only possible because for every one of these disciplines, there are scholars who have spent their entire life in the academy knowing how to do it right. And then it comes to somebody like me who can just pick up on all the stuff that they've done and then tell the story.
But sometimes I wonder, and I'm not undermining anyone's efforts because obviously that's where the heart of it is, the research, but being able to reach the people who matter and the people who can do something about it in a relatable fashion, which is why I come back to your buffet of information, becomes increasingly important. And it becomes almost like, at the end of the conversation, I'm saying, yeah, but we need more of this. We that's what we need to do. That's for it. It resonates with our kind of mission in Heritage Beko. You're on to your second set of podcasts, and you're now moving on. You said on
Season two, dropping
to
24th of this month, April.
and I was also hearing from the grapevine that you have universities and colleges who are saying that would you come in and lecture on history, which of course made you laugh uncontrollably, saying, okay, but this is the kind of information. I would love to have had a history teacher like you at some time. And by the way, I did extremely well in my history because I used to mug.
Ah,
That's all I did. I mean, Jennifer Siem's my poor history teacher. I mean, that was the only thing I think I probably really maxed. But I only remember Kundra and some very, very meh information. Somehow I remember Muhammad bin Tughlaq very well. And I remember, I think, that's the kind of information that you kind of deal with, but it's the stories that eventually stay. And
you scroll through my
in
Instagram
what
page.
language?
If you scroll through my
Yeah.
page, you will find a reel that I did on the tomb that Muhammad bin Tughlaq constructed for his Molar.
What?
Yes,
Really?
go look it up. There's a reel over there on my Instagram page about this whole mausoleum that Muhammad bin Tughlaq constructed. He was a mad guy. I don't know. I asked whether he was mad or whether he was a mad genius, because remember that what we learned in history books about this big move that he made, shifting Delhi to Daulatabad and then deciding
Yeah.
back again. Daulatabad is
Yeah.
Devagiri. Devagiri is just north of the Deccan part of it. And he did that because he felt that the south was very, very important. And if he moved it to that point in time, it would be a midpoint between the north and the south, and he could control both ends from there. That's how it worked.
Mhm.
And that Devagiri is also very important because that point later was the staging ground for the attack, of Malik Kafur's attack on the Hoysalas when he decimated the Hoysalas. The king of Devagiri gave him logistics, helped him set up a big feast, a banquet. There's great descriptions in the inscriptions of how there was this big banquet that was placed for all the soldiers that came in from his army. And then he ordered his general to accompany him and then go and fight the Hoysalas. So I know that in history we
Oh,
want this to be that the Muslims came down and they decimated these people. Yeah, with a little help from us. And Devagiri is very important. So the importance of Devagiri was that it was strategically a great military point and it
mhm.
was used as such. That's Daulatabad.
Ah,
That's what Muhammad bin Tughlaq was trying to do. He was trying to do this. Nobody else thought of it. Nobody else said, look, the Deccan is so important. All of us hanker after the Deccan. What are we doing sitting in Delhi so far away? It just turned out that it was impractical for him, so he went back. And of course, caused misery and destruction because that's his insane part of it. So, with insanity, he didn't know how to do things right and just ordered things, you know, like, uh, like a madman would. That's pretty much what happened. But then that's what makes history interesting. If you step back and start to take pieces and say, what about this? What about that? And where is this Daulatabad? And why did he move everybody there? We didn't learn enough about this in our history textbooks. We only learned that he did it. We have no idea why he did it. We just thought, the work of a madman. Not so true. But he
there's
did
so
build a
many.
tomb to his tooth.
I guess. And where is this wonderful tomb?
It's somewhere in southern Maharashtra. I put the
Okay.
exact location on my reel. You can take a look at it. It's still there. It's almost crumbling.
Wonderful.
So if somebody wants to go and see it, they better get their skates on.
I think we should get the Dentists Association to say, well, if somebody can do this, hey, you know what? That's a good idea. Actually, I think that's something that's workable. You know, I mean, talking about tombs, when Jerry was, we scattered his ashes in Srirangapattam. That was the first time maybe second time, I've gone to the Tipu Sultan's tomb. And there's something about it because it's utterly beautiful. I mean, there's it's hot as blazes, very, very odd, very meticulously designed. But what really struck me, or maybe it was my mental state at that time, was the person who was reciting or singing inside the mausoleum. Uh, Honestly, for a moment, I didn't know whether I was in a temple or whether I was not, because the sonorousness of it, the resonance, the 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 lilt, it was just, and it was so magical, you know. So sometimes, I mean, there may be stories in that. I'm sure it was not just sound; there were stories there. Uh, Again, one doesn't know. I mean, you've gone into trying to learn your Sanskrit and Prakrit, and how has this is really scholarly, exploration when you try and use language as a means of unearthing, deeper history. So tell us a little bit about that, Ramji.
Linguistics is very important in terms of history. I'm not a linguist. I mean, I know nothing about linguistics. But when you read the inscriptions and then you're reading something and then you're looking at it and you just have innately you understand that this is an inadequate translation into English by someone, generally largely Benjamin Lewis Rice, but there have been others who've all done phenomenal work. But every now and again, something about the way it was translated doesn't seem fulfilling. So I haven't really, I don't want to be mistaken for a linguist, or I'm not making the claim. But when I encounter something like this, then I go back, read the inscription. The inscriptions were depends on why and how those inscriptions were used. Either they were used in Sanskrit if they wanted to remain lofty, or they were used in Prakrit if they wanted to reach out to a bunch of people, because Prakrit was the language of the masses. And that's why the Buddhists chose Prakrit for as their lingua franca. That's what they pretty much used. And or they used the script and they wrote it in either they wrote it in old Kannada script or they used Hale Kannada words and wrote it in Sanskrit script. Depends on whatever they wanted to use it for. So either way, they look at that word, and you suddenly say that this does not seem like a good construct. At least on 5 different occasions, attempting to pick that word, going to the dictionaries, parsing it, taking it apart. At least I have the benefit of having been raised in India, so you know the connections more easily than somebody abroad were trying to do this. Then you get to understand that these are the nuances of what happens. So when you look at the nuances, if you find a flaw, then you turn to some other expert to see if you can get some corroboration on your own thoughts. And one of the reasons why it sometimes takes so much time is that something like this has kept me for the better part of 1.5 days, only for it to result in one sentence in my podcast.
Yeah.
So
But you want
then,
to have
when
that
you
level of,
start, you're not measuring these things. It's only in
yeah,
hindsight you measure it and say, did I really lose all of Wednesday and half of Thursday to get to this one sentence? Yes. But then I repeat, this, what I'm doing is nothing. Scholars in each of these disciplines that I mentioned, they've spent their whole lives doing it, and they're the ones to be applauded, really.
yeah. But that's scholarship too, Ramji. And for me, the thing is that you've chosen to do this and you've chosen to do it 100% and you've chosen to do it with authenticity because, let's move on. I mean, 90, 100 doesn't make a
Wasn't a
difference.
good
Let's,
narcissism.
let's do it. Yeah, but I mean, it is, it is a lot of work and a lot of, hats off really to the
Enjoy.
kind of love and effort that you've put into this. Clearly, you've been having a blast.
Yeah, completely.
This is a completely different, yeah, different turn for you, in terms of what you've done, and such a wonderful thing. How can we, Ramji, at Heritage Baker, which is, a motley set, so we've got multiple people, we've got people from civil society, we've got people from bureaucracy, we've got about 4 chief secretaries who are there, we've got historians, planners, architects, but we are an assorted group of people, and I'd love for you to join. But how do we collaborate with phenomenal, initiatives like yours to enrich each other and enrich the city and make a better, more heritage-focused Bangalore?
I think that let me put it this way. I don't. I mean, definitive ideas don't spring to mind right now, except that I want to say that I'm all in. I'd love to be able to work with you on Heritage Baker and the foundation and do stuff. And I think that let's start by actually putting some parts of our teams together and just blue skying a little bit, thrashing something out. So there's some ideas bubbling in my head, which I'm not ready to air in public right now, but I'll
No, I
talk.
would love to chat later. Absolutely fine. One of the dreams that I have is, you know, that we've been doing, and uh, we've been. I'm sorry to bring this back to Coven Park, but one of the things is reviving the Coven Bandstand, and we've done this with the military and various other things. We've great difficulty. We've from 8th of December, we've been having a program every Sunday, but we are really hoping to move towards, I think, also the colonial Western element. We are currently doing only Indian and classical. So one of these days is to have you, Radha, and Aman perform, and hopefully combine that with a conversation in the bandstand about the history of Bangalore. So you
Most people
commit to
don't
that.
always
So
let me in, but if they do, fine. But definitely you should have the two of them.
we will insist.
Okay.
We will absolutely insist.
Very
But Ramji, yeah, I know the people who matter, so I'll influence them. But it's been phenomenal. I mean, I'm going to leave it to you to have the last word because this has been. We've had a discussion before. We started very briefly to set the context, and I have to say that I was absolutely blown away. And I'm sorry I didn't know, but I'm glad in some ways because it's a revelation to understand just how much focus, you know, uh, concentration and commitment has been needed to get to this level of what we see as perhaps just the Instagram or the podcast, and the fact that it's part of a continuing series of exploration and delving deep into the history of Bangalore, and all this is gelled so well because we want to move on to having information and knowledge and greater love and greater protection. This is going to be a serious engine in that focus. So I'm just so delighted that we managed to have this conversation on this happy thing of World Heritage Day. More power to you, and I'll leave it to you to have the last word. But thanks so much for this freewheeling conversation. We've had all sorts of discussions, including some of them four-legged. But long live Bangalore, and may its tribe increase. No, actually not. May its green increase. Over to you, Ramji.
the drive. Yes, I agree with that. I
I
my
just
only last
realized.
word is to recognize the fact that there's such a lot of great activism that's already happening in Bangalore. We covered some of them, your dog squads, ARRC, the people that run around saving lakes. And my entire respect on this Heritage Day and my thanks go out to the people who actually get out into the field and actually do some work. And I applaud from the armchair, which is what I do. But really, it's the people that actually get out there and get hands dirty in every place, like in your dog squads, the ones that go out on the streets and actually pick up the dog and take it to the hospital to get it treated. These are the people that need to be celebrated. What's heartening is that there are so many hundreds of them in Bangalore. And what's heartening is that I know that this is only the beginning. So
Yeah,
it's just going to grow in terms of all of those things. So from that standpoint, much as we have much to complain about, we also have this. That's great.
this huge engine. Bangalore's amazing, and I am
Starts
completely.
with awareness, and I think you're doing a great job of that. I'll be happy to help in any way that I can.
I'm going to take you up on that, Ramji. So looking forward to lots more episodes, and we're going to get more people to sort of get ready for season 2. Sounds a bit like Netflix, but
Well, in the meantime, let me plug my book for no reason at all. It's
yes,
about
please. Can you
my,
please pause? I want to see not for no reason at all.
this is the book. This is
Yeah.
no reason at all. 4 years of my life in Delhi, which involved a major controversy that brought Rajiv Gandhi into it, and I had to meet him on a regular basis. This is what the book is about. It's on Amazon, it's wherever, it's in your bookstore. Bookstores are the greatest places in the
Yes,
world.
that's where we must buy them for. That we must. I get blossoms to deliver once in a while, so life is good, but great. And this is it's fiction, non-fiction,
It's
based on some form
thinly
of.
fictionalized.
Okay.
It's a true story, completely true story. It's very thinly fictionalized, and it's a fun read. I've written it as a spy thriller because it's a spy story. So I've written it like a spy thriller. So I had to go out and buy some Robert Ludlum and the others to see how it's done.
To get into the genre. And who's going to act in the film?
You're the
You
third
know it's
person.
going to happen. A story
I have
like this is going to happen.
no clue. I'm not very adept at all of these things. I just wrote the book, that's all. So that's
But
it.
hats off to the way history has kind of come out. The whole. I think it's been done professionally with love and with great skill. So, more power to you, Ramji, and to the team. I know there are people behind you who are sort of also sort of really supporting this. And let's reconnect maybe a year from now and find out all the other wonderful things we've done working together.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. It's such an enjoyable conversation. I didn't feel the time pass, but this is great. Thanks so
Mhm.
much. More power to your elbow.
Thank you. Thank you. So I will see you soon, Ramji. And I would encourage all of whoever's listening to please tune in to Spotify and to Instagram if you must. But get into this because it's going to be fun. I I think it's going to be a very, very fun ride and an important ride for us to sort of get to know Bangalore a little better. I'm looking forward to that one. So bye for now, Ramji.
It's kind
Good
of you.
wishes for the Easter weekend and my love to all three ladies.
Oh, yes. I will tell all of them. One of them is right now scratching my leg as we speak.
And is that Kara or Brownie?
Kara.
I was quite sure it was not Radha.
I, she's listening.
I'm going to